Good morning. Today's reading is from Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. That's Mark chapter 4, starting from verse 35. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and sea obey him?"
I can remember it like it was yesterday, even though it was nearly 25 years ago. I was 18 years old and it was my last day at secondary school. I'd learned to drive about 6 months earlier, and that morning I had just dropped my parents off at the bus station so they could go away for summer holidays. And I was driving home. It was a beautiful sunny morning, but it had been raining the night before, and so the road was a little bit greasy. But I was totally oblivious to that fact. I drove away from the bus station, I put my driving cassette on, yes, that's how long ago it was, and blasting through the stereo, ironically, was EMF's "You're Unbelievable." I was 18 years old, carefree, and I thought I was in charge of everything. And so, as you do when you're 18 years old, I began to accelerate and turn up the speeds. But about half a mile away from the bus station, I came to a corner that was a little steeper than I had thought. I didn't slow down for it. In fact, I began to accelerate a little bit into the corner. And within a couple of seconds, the car had just lifted off the road, only by a fraction of a millimetre, as I began to aquaplane. I didn't know what aquaplaning was back then, but I'll never forget the word now. It's where the car just lifts ever so slightly off the road and begins to skid. And even though it was only a couple of seconds, it felt like an eternity as I turned first to the right and then to the left, and then realised I was totally out of control. It didn't matter what direction I turned, the car was skidding in one direction only. There was the curb, and then there was a lamppost, and then there was a big brick wall. Being out of control is terrifying, especially when you don't know for sure that it won't end badly. I don't think I can remember a moment that's felt more out of control than the moment that we're in our culture at the moment, a moment that's felt more chaotic than this. In many respects, it feels a bit like we're in the middle of the perfect storm. Obviously, in the first instance, there is the COVID-19 situation. And when it comes to control and chaos, really everything else is just a footnote, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter how much we try and control our circumstances, COVID-19 just doesn't care. COVID-19 doesn't respect borders. It doesn't respect economies. It doesn't respect government policy. It certainly doesn't respect human life. It just smashes its way in and wreaks havoc wherever it finds itself. And how that's all going to play out, well, who knows? Because no one's in control really of COVID-19. But then it's not as though there's nothing else going on at the moment. When it comes to global politics, increasingly it begins to feel like everything is out of control. America is squaring up to China and sometimes Russia. China and India just this week began squaring up to each other on their borders. You've got rogue states like North Korea increasingly and ongoingly pursuing nuclear weapons, and no one knows quite what they're going to do at any one time. In the last few weeks, the divisions between different ethnic groups and different racial groups have become increasingly obvious, and man's inhumanity to man finds its way onto the pages of our newspapers every single day. Increasingly, it seems normal for people to adopt far left or far right positions, politically speaking, and the whole thing feels like a tinderbox that might just blow up at any one time, spiraling out of control into increasing chaos. And it's not as though the problems are just out there. I saw this great video by John Cleese, the comedian who used to be in Monty Python. It was a video he produced 30 years ago, but it couldn't have felt more contemporary or more relevant. In the video, he was speaking about how often it's quite satisfying to adopt an extreme position and pit yourself against others. Increasingly, we're a society where we like to demonize others. We like to have enemies out there. In it, he said, somewhat ironically, the good thing about having lots of enemies is that all the badness in the world is in your enemies, and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. It's attractive, isn't it? And the great thing about that video, that little bit of satire, was that it does such a good job of exposing the fact that so often, actually, yes, there's plenty of chaos out there, but there's plenty of chaos in here as well. Plenty of badness even. I know that too often my mind and my thoughts and my actions and my attitudes are chaotic. I am not the person I want to be. Too often I am a contributor to the chaos rather than a controller of the chaos. So much is out of control, it seems. It's the perfect storm. And when you're in the middle of the chaos, naturally we look for control. We want someone who can just get everything in hand. Who is it that you look to in the middle of chaos? Who do you hope is going to sort it all out? Maybe you look to the government. Maybe you look to the crowds. Maybe you look to the indomitable human spirit. Maybe you look to yourself. Who do you look to in the chaos to get control? The story that we had read to us just a few minutes ago is a story of chaos. It is the story of the perfect storm. Jesus is with his disciples in a boat on the Sea of Galilee in Israel. And they set out, I guess, to cross the Sea of Galilee. And when they set out, everything seems calm and normal. But the combination of the climate and the geography of the Sea of Galilee mean that sometimes incredible and ferocious storms get whipped up almost out of nowhere. It's a regular event. And all of a sudden, therefore, these fishermen, experienced fishermen as they are, find themselves frightened for their lives. You read the words, you can hear them again. Verse 37 says, "A great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling." They're in the middle of this lake, this sea, and the waves are literally crashing all around them, and the boat is beginning to fill up, and they are terrified at what they are experiencing. Add into that the fact that in the Hebrew mindset, the sea represented chaos, a kind of deep-lying primordial chaos that was there right at the heart of the creation. And these men, these fishermen, are right in the thick of it at this moment. And they're not just day trippers who've rented a boat and headed out optimistically on a sunny day. No, these are experienced fishermen who are out on the Sea of Galilee most days and nights. They know how to fish, they know how to sail, they know how to stay safe. And that's why the words of verse 38 are all the more sobering all of a sudden. Verse 38, they go to Jesus and they say to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Don't you care that we're dying? We are in the middle of a perfect storm, Jesus. Where are you at this moment? And even though there are waves crashing all around them, even though the water is filling up in the boat, those words that they speak are perhaps the most terrifying of all, because in the chaos, we always look for someone to exert control. It doesn't matter who you are, we all do it. Well, in this moment, they turn to Jesus in the hope that he might be the one to exert the control. But all of a sudden, they're beginning to question whether or not he can do that. What is it like when you begin to wonder if the person you are hoping can get a grip on things can't? Or worse even, what is it like when the person you hope will get a grip on things doesn't seem to care? Being out of control is terrifying, especially when you don't know that it won't end badly. But that's not where this story in Mark's Gospel goes. It's amazing, isn't it? When the disciples go to Jesus out of desperation, they find him asleep on a cushion. Like, as you're reading the story, you think to yourself, how on earth is Jesus able to sleep on a cushion in the midst of this incredible storm that's raging all around him as the boat begins to fill with water? And the disciples' first assumption is that it's because he just doesn't care, that he's indifferent. But as you read the story, you begin to understand it's not because Jesus doesn't care, it's not because he's indifferent, it is rather because he is in complete control. And if the fact that he's asleep is amazing in the first instance, what he does next is even more incredible. It says in verse 39 that he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. I wonder, if you read that story, hear those words, does it strike you as odd that Jesus speaks to the wind and the sea? Think about it for a moment, all right? Maybe next weekend, if the sun's out and you can get there, you might head to Southend-on-Sea, somewhere like that. When you get there, I want to encourage you to walk up to the seafronts. The wind and the waves will be blowing and crashing against the shore. I want you to just walk up to the sea and to stand there as you look out and just say to the waves as they approach you on the shore, "Peace, be still," and just see what happens. Now, I know you're not going to do that, and I don't blame you, because I wouldn't do that either, because you and I both know if we were to do that, we would look like complete idiots. Everybody would be there licking their ice creams, looking on at us thinking, this bloke has lost his mind. What on earth is he doing? No one speaks to a storm. No one speaks to the wind and the waves to stop them. No one, that is, except Jesus. Because Jesus knows that his words are so powerful, that he has the power within him that they can stop the storm. And as he speaks to this storm, all of a sudden, the great windstorm is followed by a great calm. The perfect storm becomes perfect peace. You ever experienced that? Great calm, perfect peace. I remember last summer, we went away on a family holiday for a little while, and on one of the days we were on holiday, we rented a canoe by a river. And the five of us jumped into this one canoe, and for a lovely sunny afternoon, we just coasted down this river. And because it was such a hot and sunny day, we spent quite a lot of the time jumping in and out of the canoe and swimming alongside it and just enjoying the water. And there's one moment where I jumped into the river, and because I was wearing a life jacket, I just kind of rolled over onto my back and lay there. An incredible sense of serene peace settled over me for a minute. I could hear the kids laughing in the background. I could feel the water. It was just the perfect temperature washing all around me. As I lay on my back looking up at the sky, it was perfectly blue, not a cloud in the sky. And in the periphery of my vision, I could see the trees all around me just blowing in the gentle breeze. And all of a sudden, the cliches just started to flood in. I felt an incredible peace. I felt as though I didn't have a care in the world. I felt like I was at peace with the world. I felt like I was one with the world. And it just lasted for a minute. You ever experienced perfect peace? You ever experienced a great calm? If you're lucky enough to have experienced that, you know it's wonderful, but at the same time, it's incredibly frustrating. Because it only ever lasts for a short time. It's frustratingly fleeting. That moment comes to an end, and all of a sudden the realities of life come flooding back in, don't they? The chaos of the creation, it comes close all of a sudden. The fact that we're not in control of our world becomes a reality again. And the moment of peace that you've enjoyed almost highlights the fact that we are out of control, and creates in us a longing for peace, a longing for calm, a longing for control at the deepest possible level. We long for a world and a climate that isn't spiraling out of control. We long for global politics that represents peace, not war. We long for hearts and minds that aren't chaotic and inadequate. And that's what this moment in this story represents. The calm and the peace that Jesus can truly bring. Perfect peace, and the fact that Jesus has the power to bring it. You see, people often make the mistake of thinking that the primary contribution that Jesus makes to bringing control to our world is in and through his moral and ethical teaching. Now, don't hear me wrong. If everybody in our world lived according to Jesus's teaching, undoubtedly this world would be a much better place. And for many of us, we have the privilege of living in a society and in a moment that is underpinned and stands on the foundations of many of Jesus's teachings, and we're the better off for it. But if we think that the solution to the chaos of our world is you and I just doing a bit better morally speaking, then we're kidding ourselves. We've tried, we've failed. We know that isn't the ultimate solution. We know we need something much deeper than that, something much more lasting, a deeper level of control than you or I or anyone else, it seems, is able to exert. And in this story, Jesus shows that he can, that he has the power to do it. And that is why his disciples respond in the way that they do. And it's really striking, isn't it? As you hear the story being read, you don't then hear the disciples, as they see what Jesus has done, start kind of cheering and celebrating and sort of backslapping and high-fiving Jesus and that kind of thing, saying, "Well done, Jesus, we knew you had it in you. Let's head back to the shore now for some fish and chips so we can all get on with our lives." No, instead, their reaction is very striking indeed. It says very simply, they were filled with a great fear, and they asked, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Who is this? And if your understanding of Jesus Christ doesn't understand him as the one who can bring control in the chaos, then this story would suggest you haven't really understood who Jesus is. If your understanding of Jesus is not of him as someone who can take the perfect storm and bring about a perfect peace, then you haven't really understood him. If your understanding of Jesus doesn't leave room for you being maybe just a little bit afraid of him, then you haven't really understood him. So you can imagine the scene. The disciples are there with their mouths open, their jaws have dropped, gently bobbing up and down on the now calm Sea of Galilee, desperately trying to process what it is that they've just seen taking place in front of me, almost incapable of coming up with an answer to the question that Jesus asked them just a few moments earlier. Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? Why are you so struggling to trust me? Why are you so struggling to believe in me? The evidence is so plain and in front of you. It is so obvious and easy to see. Why won't you trust me? I guess you might ask the same question to us if he were here today. Why won't you trust me? Where exactly is it that you're looking, and where is it that you're putting your trusts? Where are you hoping to find the peace that you long for? Who are you hoping it is who's going to step in and control the chaos to bring the calm? Why no faith? Because the fact of the matter is we're all putting our faith somewhere. We're all hoping in someone to sort out the chaos. But it might be that as you're weighing it up, as you're doing the compare and contrast between who it is you trust and where it is you put your faith, there's one niggling thought that you're having as you're thinking about Jesus. That being, if Jesus is so powerful, as this story seems to suggest, why doesn't he just sort it all out now? I mean, today, why doesn't he make it all go away in this moment? Well, the answer to that question, in part at least, is out of love. Let me explain what I mean. You see, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking in the midst of the chaos, and I do this all the time. We fall into the trap of thinking we are just victims of the chaos. I'm a nice guy trying to get on in the world, and these bad things keep on happening. But the fact of the matter is that in some ways, yes, I'm a victim of the chaos, but in so many other ways, I'm a contributor to the chaos. We've talked already about the thoughts and the attitudes and the actions that flow out from my heart and my mind and my hands. So often I'm not the solution to the world's problems, I am the world's problems. And if I want Jesus to come in and control the chaos and bring about a perfect peace, then he is going to need to get rid of everything that contributes to the chaos, which includes me. And the fact is, Jesus has promised actually one day he'll come back and he'll bring in a place of perfect peace and of perfect calm. He will control the chaos, which means that I am left needing saving. But the good news is that Jesus is the perfect saviour. There's a really interesting link between this story here in Mark's Gospel in chapter 4 and a story from the Old Testament about a guy called Jonah. The Old Testament is the first 2/3 of the Bible, and the name Jonah, I'm guessing, is going to be familiar. We have all heard about Jonah and the whale. Exactly, there you go. But what you might not know is the story that leads up to Jonah finding himself in the belly of the whale. You see, Jonah is a guy who decides he's in control. He wants to take control of his own life and to run away from God. And so what he does is he goes and he gets on a boat on the Mediterranean to a place called Tarshish, which is, he thinks, about as far away from God as he can get. But God doesn't give up on Jonah. And so he decides to pursue him. He does that by sending a great big storm, the perfect storm. And in the midst of the storm, as Jonah's boat is sailing along and the sailors are doing their very best to keep the boat afloat, they discover Jonah in the boat asleep with his head on a cushion. And the astute reader begins to draw the links. Now, in Jonah's story, when he wakes up, he realizes he's the cause of the storm, the contributor to the chaos. And so he says to the sailors, look, there's only one thing to do. You've got to throw me over the edge of this boat. That's the only way everyone is going to be saved. And the sailors do their best to come up with a different solution, but in the end they realize it's probably true. And so with very heavy hearts, they throw Jonah over the side of the boat and into the chaos. And as they do that, the storm relents and the calm and the peace come. You see, if you're reading this story in Mark's Gospel for the first time, but you know the story of Jonah, you're thinking to yourself, you're hearing the echoes, and you're wondering when these disciples find Jesus asleep in the boat and they come to him and they say, Jesus, don't you care that we're perishing? You're wondering if perhaps the solution is going to be that Jesus throws himself over the side and brings the calm and the peace that they need. Well, we've read the story already, and you know that doesn't happen. At least not immediately. But this story here in Mark's Gospel is one small piece of the bigger story that is the life of Jesus told across the rest of the pages of Mark's Gospel. And if you read on, you will discover that Jesus is heading exactly into the chaos. Jesus takes a decision to sacrifice himself. He heads to Jerusalem where he knows death awaits him, death on a cross. And as you read in the last parts of Mark's gospel about the death of Jesus Christ, you witness him, as it were, plunging headfirst into the chaos. And as he does that, he takes the consequences of the chaos upon himself so that we don't have to. That's what's going on as Jesus dies. He dies in our place so that we might be released and freed. He undergoes the chaos so that we might experience the calm. He goes through the storm so that we might enjoy the peace. He undergoes hell so that we might experience heaven. And that's where the story ends in Mark's gospel. Jesus sacrificing himself for the sake of the peace of his people. I read a story a couple of years ago. There's a story of two little boys who were playing by the side of the Mississippi River. And they were playing on some of the sandbanks and the levees that had been put in place in order to keep the flooding of the Mississippi River at bay. And on that one afternoon, they were playing around in the sand when unwittingly they started playing on some of the quicksand that had developed. And very quickly it began to suck both of these little boys in. Well, eventually the rescuers heard the screams and they came running and they saw the one little boy, just his head and shoulders just above the sand, screaming, "Please, you got to help me and my brother." And tentatively, as the rescuers edged towards this little boy on the sand, they said to him, "Where is your brother?" And the little boy just said back with tears in his eyes, "I'm standing on his shoulders." You see, that little boy plunged himself into the chaos to rescue his little brother. And that's Jesus Christ. He controls the chaos and brings the calm by sacrificing himself so that we don't have to. And all we need to do is trust in him. He steps into the perfect storm to enable the perfect peace because he's the perfect Saviour.